Le roi est mort. The king is dead. But in this case, the king is the Pac-12. Say goodbye, adieu, adieu, adieu to the Pac-12 conference. Because as we all know, the Pac-12 conference is dead. I'm Jackson Bliss, and this is the Dream Pop Origami channel. For those of you that don't know or have forgotten, out of pain and amnesia and repression, the sad fact is the Pac-12 conference is dead. This is the last year for the Pac-12. Different people have different theories about what caused its dissolution, but to backtrack just a little bit, first, the bombshell news came out that USC, my alma mater, and UCLA were ditching the Pac-12 for the Big Ten. There was some understandable outrage and disbelief, but mathematically, financially, and culturally, it made a lot of sense. Soon afterwards, Arizona, Arizona State, and Utah appeared to be headed towards the Big 12, which is officially where they signed. Soon after that, we learned that Oregon and UW would also be joining USC and UCLA in the Big Ten. Now, we're on the threshold of what appears to be a deal with the ACC, where Stanford and Berkeley and probably SMU will all go to the ACC. All of these dramatics are recent events. This still leads to one basic question, which is how the hell did this happen? I'll tell you exactly how. And my answer begins and ends with tomorrow. For those of you that care about college football, and that might be a lot of you, that might be very few of you, tomorrow is the beginning of college football. It's what we call week 0. That's essentially the week before the official football schedule kicks in. Even though tomorrow is the beginning of college football, I cannot watch the USC Trojans play. Why not? Because they're on the Pac-12 network, which is fucking terrible. It's the worst network there is for college football. I'm so pumped to see the Trojans play against San Jose State. We have a Heisman-winning quarterback who's absolutely going to spend his last year at SC before he jumps to the NFL as, the first pick of the NFL draft. And beyond that, we have some phenomenal transfer players who aren't going to stick around. But the fact that I cannot watch my own team play in LA, and I live in LA, and my school's in LA, and I can't watch this fucking game is ridiculous. The truth is, the Pac-12 is the only power conference that doesn't have a major TV contract with ESPN and or with any of the other major TV channels. Fuck, even Notre Dame, my other alma mater from where I got my first master's degree, has a lifelong contract with NBC. I can watch Fighting Irish games every single Saturday. And that school's in fucking Indiana. But I cannot watch my Trojans play and the stadium is literally 10 miles away. It's absurd. Because the Pac-12 failed to secure a contract with ESPN and the other major networks, that means its total revenue was much lower, which means the amount of money each school made is much lower. And that trickles down to a lot of important small and large things that constantly disadvantage Pac-12 college football teams and fan bases. When you have less money, you have less money for facilities, for maintenance, for hiring the top-notch coaches, nutritionists, experts. You have less money for weight room, scholarships, buildings, food, diversity, transportation costs. You have less money for football analysts, for recruitment, for hiring skilled marketing teams. It affects your team in a bunch of small and large ways. This shit matters a lot. But back to the problem I started with, which will also be the problem I end with in this episode. The fact that the only way I can watch SC play tomorrow is by basically buying one of these apps like Fubo and Sling TV and VidGo. What the hell are these app names anyways? They sound like war acronyms. They sound like failing penny stock ticker symbols. Honestly, they're just giving me flashbacks to a bunch of IT companies that went out of business in the 90s. I guess that's the plight of being a Gen X person, right? But to get back to my fundamental point, the fact that I can watch games in the ACC, the SEC, the Big Ten, literally on any channel tomorrow in LA, but I can't watch games in the Pac-12 conference living in the West Coast, in the largest media market in the entire West Coast, and the second largest media market after New York. This is absurd. But in case there's any speculation that the college football schedule was the only thing wrong with the Pac-12, there were other problems too. Let's quickly jump into these. First off, Pac-12 football games started way too late. Some of these games didn't start till 9, 10 o'clock. There's no way viewers on the East Coast are going to stay up until 2 in the morning. And honestly, with the way that Pac-12 officiating crews operate, slowing down the game and making 2.5-hour games last 4.5, sometimes 5 hours, you'd be up until 3 in the morning in New York City watching some of these Pac-12 games in the dark. Unsurprisingly, a lot of Pac-12 football schools got shafted in a lot of the AP polls because a lot of AP voters weren't even up to watch their game. Another thing, unlike the SEC, the Pac-12 does nothing to protect and certainly doesn't coddle its playoff contenders. Look at the SEC. Not only do they play one less conference game every year, but their best teams routinely ignore or routinely skip the other best teams in their conference. I mean, when's the last time that Georgia played Alabama in the regular season? How in the world is Georgia, who has won the championship twice in a row now, how are they avoiding LSU and Bama in the same season? How is the returning champion SEC have the worst strength of schedule? Well, there are a lot of reasons, but one of them is the SEC is phenomenal at protecting its own. The Pac-12, not so much. This is why Pac-12 teams always cannibalize each other all the time, because the teams in this conference are going to have 12 more losses than if they played another out-of-conference game in their schedule. It's that simple. It's pure mathematics. To be honest, I'm incredibly sad that the Pac-12 is dissolving. When I moved to LA back in 2009, when I started going to SC, it was a state of joy and exuberation and quite honestly pride and celebration to go to games in this conference. For one thing, the academics in the Pac-12 are phenomenal. When you have Stanford, Berkeley, USC, UCLA, UW, and Oregon all in the same conference, I mean, if you just took all the Nobel laureates, right, all of the most famous academics and research scientists and counted them among those 6 schools, they probably have more Nobel laureates than like half of Europe, like probably more than most of Asia. Just those 6 schools. The intellectual and academic and research superpower of those 6 schools combined is phenomenal, and they will never be repeated again. Beyond that, if you're like me and you care about other sports besides football, it's hard not to notice that the Pac-12 had a series of national victories. There was once a time back in the day when Pac-12 track and field, baseball, water polo, volleyball, soccer, and yes, for a long time until recently, basketball, were all amazing teams in the Pac-12. With basketball specifically, there was a time when USC, UCLA, Arizona, Oregon, and even Stanford were all phenomenal basketball teams. Obviously, those days have passed, but there was a time, and no one who has a good memory of the NCAA tournament would think otherwise. It's sad, it's frustrating, it's still hard to believe, but the truth is, the dissolution of the Pac-12 is 100% the fault of the conference and no one else. No one else did this to the conference. The conference did this to itself when it settled for inferior TV rights and smaller TV revenue. The conference did this to itself when the conference didn't fight for better TV deals, when it didn't know when to sit down, when it didn't know when to stand up, and when it thought that it could make up for its TV revenue by trying to come up with alternate deals that didn't work. Ironically, this might be the best year for Pac-12 football in the history of the conference. I know that sounds crazy, but it's true. UW looks fantastic. Oregon is competitive, often brilliant every year. This is probably Utah's last best year with Cam Rising as their quarterback. SC could easily win the conference, and if their defense is just marginally better than last year, SC could easily make the conference. Or they could get their ass kicked, especially if they can't defeat Utah and Oregon and UW. But with a Heisman winning quarterback, anything is possible for USC. So you already have 4 teams in the Pac-12, UW, Oregon, USC, and Utah, who could all make it to the playoffs. And then you have some sleeper teams that absolutely deserve more respect. Oregon State, believe it or not, has been fantastic the past couple of years. Their defense last year was phenomenal, and this year it might even be better, right? The point is, ironically, this might be the golden year of college football for the Pac-12. And the sad thing is, it doesn't fucking matter because this conference is disappearing. Ultimately, while I'm sad and I'm heartbroken, at least the one consolation I have is since SC joined the Big Ten, I know they're going to get a lot more money than they would have in the Pac-12. And most importantly, I know that I'll be able to watch every single game this time instead of downloading some shitty app that no one's ever heard of and that no one ever uses. So I'm sad. I'm proud of the conference and what it used to be and what it used to represent. But to be perfectly honest, I'm more excited about what the future holds for the 4 Pac-12 teams that are joining the Big Ten. Thanks so much for watching this video. Wish you all best of luck. Fight on.